Imagine this. You're playing in a tournament where the field includes Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, Alireza Firouzja, and the one always in the spotlight, Hans Niemann, and a dozens of monsters. Now imagine, you win it. That's exactly what happened in the early title Tuesday. And the player who pulled it off, Pranav V from India. The final round, it was Pranav versus Hans Niemann, with the tournament on the line. And Pranav brought the heat. He took down Hans, secured the win, and walked away with the whole thing. And guess what? That's not even the craziest part. In the round before, Hans pulled off one of the greatest comebacks of the year against Alireza Firouzja from a completely lost possession. That's insane. So in this video, we are diving deep into two insane games. Pranav versus Hans, Hans versus Alireza Firouzja. Magnus and Hikaru just had a bad day, so let's leave them. Yeah, buckle up. This title Tuesday had everything. Let's jump in. So starting with the game of the champion, Pranav V versus Hans Niemann. Pranav, playing with the white pieces, opened the game with 1 e4. e5 by Niemann, knight f3, knight c6, and just a disclaimer, Hans was actually leading the tournament. He was the sole leader with maybe 8.5 or maybe 9 points. So knight c3, knight to f6. We have the 4 knights game, which is considered one of the drawish line. Bishop to b5, and now we have the move bishop to d6. And now many of the beginners would be already surprised at this point. Like, why bishop on d6? You are kind of putting your pawn on d7, not allowing your bishop to get developed. It looks strange, but like this is the usual way to play, because for example, if you play something like d6, just protecting the pawn, white can already strike in the center with d4, and white is already better. Like if you take, I can just take with the knight, putting more pressure, and white is already better. Going back, for example, if you play just like bishop to c5, just developing the bishop, the idea is to simply play d6 and castle up. White can already sack the knight, takes and d4. And white is basically a piece down for now, but he's going to get the piece back in the next move. And white is just having a complete control in the center. His pieces are much more developed. And white is once again playing for an edge. Going back, that's why one of the main line is to play the move bishop to d6 in 4 knights game. We have d3 by white, just protecting the pawn on the e4. a6, bishop goes back, castle up, and now we have the move a3. Now, once again, it looks like just to castle up and have a fine position. But I believe after castle, maybe Pranav thought of b5, bishop b3, knight a5, and maybe Hans will simply chop off his bishop on b3. So he just decided to play the move a3, just making a square for the bishop to go on a2. Rook e8, castle up, bishop goes back, because now everything is fine. The rook is defending the pawn. Now black wants to play the move d6, the bishop comes out, and the bishop on f8 is generally a good piece, just defending the king. h3, making sure there is no back rank, and also taking away the g4 square from the knight or the bishop. h6, rook to e1, d6, and now we have the move bishop cross c6, just kind of disturbing black's pawn on, like basically doubling up the pawns on the c file. And now the main idea of capturing the knight is to strike in the center with d4. Of course, or else why will you ever give up the bishop for the knight? We have ed, like very obvious reasons. Knight cross d4, attacking the pawn on c6, and now we have c5 and now knight c6. Already after c5, many of the beginners, or many of even the club level players, or even the highest level players, would like to play a move like knight f3 or maybe knight f5, maybe. Knight c6 is a move which looks like already a bit suspicious. You're kind of trapping your own knight. It's a self-trap knight, because the knight is not really having any squares after queen d7. But there is one square for the knight, and that's exactly where the Pranav went. And you will be actually shocked. Knight c6 is the only move that, which is the best move. Knight f5, and the idea is to put the knight on c4, which is a good square for the knight. And now g6, which was already a bad move in this position. Hans' idea was pretty simple. He wanted to develop the bishop on g7, which is a good square for the bishop. Makes sense. But here, maybe c6 would have been much better because, particularly speaking about, this diagonal is a bit weak after g6. Because now we have queen f3. The knight is attacked. And if you just try to go for your own idea with bishop g7, it's already a bad idea because I can play e5. I'm attacking the knight. I'm attacking the rook. White is already better. I can even play the move bishop cross h6. If takes, I'll just chop off the knight and I'm a pawn up with a very fine position. Going back, we have knight to h7. I believe Hans missed this move. And now we have the move bishop goes to f4. e5 looks natural. You want to capture the rook. But after rook b8, you can't really go for capturing the pawn as well because you are losing the rook. So it makes sense to first develop the bishop, just connecting the rooks. That makes sense. Rook goes to b8, and now we have the move b3 because the pawn on b2 was hanging. Bishop goes to g7, and now rook d1. Don't worry, the knight is not really hanging because the queen is defending the knight. And now knight to g5. Bishop g5, g5, and now knight to d5. Already white looks better. White, all pieces are nicely placed. Both the rooks are centralized on the d and the e file. The queen is nicely placed on f3. The knight is nicely placed on d5. Maybe the knight on a5 is not really well placed, but that's fine. I would definitely love to play with the white pieces in this position. I want to play knight f6 check and maybe just take out the dark square bishop, and I'm the one going to dominate the game. Hans is like, that makes sense. Let's play rook e6, just covering the f6 square, not allowing white knight to jump on f6. But who knows? Who knew? Pranav went e5. What's e5? It's a free pawn, right? White is just opening up the queen, though nothing is happening. I can go for capturing the pawn. Hans simply captured the pawn with the bishop. Makes sense. Because if you just capture the bishop, I'll just recapture it and that's fine. Okay, I can't really capture because there's a check and I lose the queen. But I'll just capture with the pawn and that's nothing is happening. Like knight f6, I can take. If you take the queen, I'll just take your queen. And that's fine. That's an equal position. But Pranav had something different in his mind. He played the move knight to c6. And that's a brilliancy. That's a brilliancy. He's attacking the rook. And not only the rook. For example, if black just tries to move the rook, just knight takes the bishop. You can't really take because you lose the queen. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. And you have to capture the knight. That's exactly what happened. But now, knight to f6 check, and guess what? That's a discovered attack. He wins the queen, and now bishop to f5 by Hans. And there's another tactic coming up, which is rook cross e5. And he just wins the bishop for free. If you take the rook, I'll just take off the rook, and that's winning. That's completely winning. So that's why after rook cross e5, only in 26th move, Hans Niemann decided to resign the game, and that's literally it. Like, white is having a queen for the bishop, every pawn is collapsing, and that's it. That's game over. That's how Pranav became the champion of the early title Tuesday. Magnus had a bad day. He drew the second game. He lost the third game, which is insane. Rest games he won, but still. Hikaru also had a bad day, came 14th. Magnus came third, but that's fine. Despite loss, Hans came second. Just imagine if he would have just drew this game, maybe he would have maybe became the champion. Maybe, yeah, I believe yes. Okay, so this was the game between Pranav versus Hans Niemann. So now let's check out the comeback. Hans versus Alireza Firouzja. Okay, so now we have the game between Hans Niemann versus Alireza Firouzja. From the last second game of the early title Tuesday, Hans is playing with white, Alireza is playing with black. And yeah, just a disclaimer, make sure to look at the time of both the players because that's a bit necessary, yeah, in this game. Both, like, it's a blitz game, 3 minutes plus choosing an increment. 1 e4 by Hans, c5 by Alireza. He's a very aggressive player. He likes to play aggressive chess, so we have Silden, a very aggressive opening. Knight to f3, d6, bishop to b5, and now we have the move knight to d7. Bishop goes to a4. Now already bishop a4 is a bit surprising. What's bishop a4? Why aren't you simply castling up? Why aren't you just developing your knight or maybe pushing up a pawn? Bishop a4. Just trying out new things. Maybe idea could be c3, bishop c2, maybe. Or already just taking some precautions with a6. Knight f6, castle up, and now we have a6. If you try to go for capturing the pawn on e4, which is not a great move because after rook e1 you are kind of allowing white to develop his pieces. After knight f6, white can already strike in d4. And a funny way is, like after takes checks, for example, if black just, sorry about that, white is going to take back with the knight. And like white's pieces are very nicely placed. You can see the king is still in the center. If you try to play something like g6, already bishop f4, bishop g7, bishop d6, you can't really capture because the pawn is pinned. That's a bit of fun line. Okay, that's why in the main theory you don't really go for capturing the pawn. Instead a6 with the idea of b5, bishop b3, c4, and the bishop is trapped. Makes sense. c4. White played c4, just taking away the b5 square. Makes sense. e6, knight c3, b6 with the idea of bishop b7, developing the bishop and also attacking the pawn. e5 by Niemann. Takes, knight takes, and now bishop d6. And after bishop d6, I'm already assuming Hans Niemann now is all on his own. Yeah, he's thinking on the board now. Both the players are having around 2.5 minutes. After bishop d6, Hans decided to play the move d4, which was already a blunder. Like for example, if you just go back, black is going to play bishop b7, developing all his pieces, castling up, and I would already love to play with the black pieces. Both the bishops are eyeing on the king's side and black is just super happy. Okay, so you can't really go back. White played d4, he took, and now the most important and like the most interesting fact here is you can't really go for capturing the pawn. That's simply a pawn blunder, because after takes, Hans is like, okay, let me capture it back because the knight is pinned with the bishop. Alireza is like, no. After b5, the bishop is kind of no longer pinned. You're losing the queen, and your bishop is also attacked. So you're kind of completely losing the game. You are losing a bishop, and that's it. That's exactly why a better move would have been, instead of d4, was to first go for capturing the knight, and now playing d4. And this is still fine for white because definitely black is having the bishop pair advantage, but white king is bit castled, it's safe, pieces are nicely developed, centralized, and white is absolutely fine. Instead we have d4, takes, and now just look at the time of Hans. 1 minute 8 seconds. Like he spent 1 minute, I don't know, maybe 12 seconds. Like he nearly took half of his time, half of the clock time, and he played the move knight f3. Because if you just try to capture the knight, you lose the bishop. Makes sense, and white is already fine. So we have e5 by Alireza. Alireza has a pawn up. He's having 2 minutes 23 seconds on his clock. Hans Niemann is just having 1 minute 8 seconds on his clock. That's insane. Bishop g5, castle up, knight e4, knight to d5. Yeah. h6, bishop goes back, and now we have the move knight to c5. Because white wants to go for capturing the knight, capture this knight, and kind of mess up the kingside pawn structure, which makes sense. And okay, in the game we had knight c5. Better move would have been to play b5, which is a very strong move. Takes, and now g5. The knight is really hanging up, so you have to first take the knight. Takes, bishop goes back, knight c5. And now black is having a fine position, nice center control. His pieces are now getting developed, and black is already fine. Instead, obviously, I'm just using engines, so it's easier to evaluate the position, but in the game, you can't really see the engines. Knight c5, bishop takes the knight, takes, and now we have bishop to c2. d3 by Firouzja. It looks like black is just giving up a pawn, but after e4, black is winning up a piece. And now many of the viewers will be simply shocked because of the bar. It shows 0.5. Though Alireza is a piece up. That's already a bit strange. And guess what? After queen f3, the only move for black to keep his slight advantage is to play the move f5, which is insane. Obviously, Firouzja played the move the second best move, king to g7, which was the second best move, already +1 advantage. That's insane. Basically, after f5, after bishop f5, queen g5, and you can see how the queen is well defending the king, despite giving up just a pawn, because anyways the f pawns were doubled up. So yeah, sorry about that. Going back, yeah. So after f5, bishop f5, queen g5, and black is better. Instead, we have king g7, and now rook d1. Definitely white is a piece down, but just look at the activity. The rook is opened up, the bishop is opened up, the knight and queen is doing a good job attacking the king. Rook e8, knight to e3. Okay, though knight f4 was the best according to the engine, but okay, let's leave it. Knight e3, rook a7 with the idea of maybe rook d7, rook e7 makes sense. b4, rook 8. What's rook 8? Make sure to look at the time. Firouzja was having 5 seconds. Hans is having 27 seconds. That's already insane. And we had rook 8, which is completely losing move now. The rook is hanging. This is hanging. Everything is hanging. If you try to go back with the knight b7, still after c5, takes, knight c5, knight c4, attacks the bishop. Even if you try to play rook d7, defending the bishop, it's already a blunder after takes. Queen g3 check. It's a check, you lose the rook, and that's GG, game is over. So that's why we had rook 8, just takes. Queen c7, already has now +5 advantage. Queen f3 takes, king h1. Hans is like, okay, I don't really care, go for capturing the pawn on h2, I don't really care. Bishop goes back because g3 is a big threat. Bishop f4, knight f5 check, and Firouzja decided to resign the game. Kind of natural, of course, because it's getting checkmated. If you take over here, bishop f5, still you are losing. You are just rook down, that's it. You are rook down. Like, just imagine, Alireza was a pawn up. Like, Alireza was literally a pawn up after, like, at this moment. He's a pawn up. He's having, around double time of Hans Niemann. He played some move. The game got so complicated. Despite being a piece down, the position is so complicated. White is winning. And that's insane. You see, this is the power of the activity and how Hans Niemann just made a huge comeback against Alireza Firouzja. Of course, it's a blitz. It's a blitz time format. Anything can happen, but still it's amazing, yeah? So yeah, this was the game. Both the games were absolutely stunning, I believe. I hope you guys have loved it. If you did, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to come up with such more interesting videos like this. So what are your thoughts about Pranav being the champion of the Early Title Tuesday? Make sure to tell me in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'm going to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.